The Nintendo Switch is one of the most perplexing systems I ever come across. It is lacking so many features and is so behind when it comes to console features, but despite that, you'll hear nothing but praise for the system. Ever since the launch of the console, it has always felt like the Switch was in a state of beta that would eventually be updated, similar to how the 360 got various UI updates. But it has been 4 years as of writing this, and we still are left with a lifeless and empty UI dash with barely any quality of life features. I honestly think that this is the worst UI Nintendo has ever put out, considering the GameCube UI was only used for settings. It's just so bland and lifeless. Minimalistic, some would call it, which I know is what people like, but that's never really been Nintendo's MO for their consoles. Every Nintendo console has had some kind of charm added to the UI, at least anyone that could produce one. But very uncharacteristically, the Switch lacks any Nintendo charm. No unique startup animation, not counting the one time you boot up the Switch for the first time, no soft music or noises in the background, no customization in the UI, no fun animations or interactions, just nothing but a PS4 dash and circle icons for settings. Interestingly, the Switch UI is very reminiscent of the original DS, but in my opinion, it still kept its charm whilst also being very fast-paced, which is what Nintendo seemed to want to do for the Switch. Since the DS came out in 2004, there really wasn't a reason for them to have an expansive UI, and it being the first Nintendo handheld to have one, it has the excuse of being a little bare bones. Back on topic, the reason why the DS succeeded in having a fast but charming UI was that it gave you the option to boot directly into a game that was either inserted into the DS or GBA slots after turning on your console. Otherwise, it booted a simple UI that utilized the touchscreen that was very simple to use and even had a section for PictoChat that allowed users to write messages to nearby friends. Not a necessary feature, but a nice addition. With the DSi and later 3DS, the UI evolved, adding music to the background, customizable tiles for games, size preferences, and eventually themes and customizable icons for the 3DS. While there could be an argument raised that the increase in UI features also slowed down the wait from system boot to gameplay, I'm going to leave that topic for now and come back to it later. Now, looking at the GameCube up to Wii U, you can see a similar type of evolution, albeit more advanced, starting with the UI with background noise and charming animations, to an interesting and welcoming take on a UI inspired by TV channels, to essentially emulating what the 3DS was doing, incorporating its own unique spin. Again, the same argument could be made, but it's not really relevant to the Switch since this is the Switch we're talking about. A console that has a sleep and suspend mode that at any point during gameplay you can shut off and resume at any time without a hassle. Before you say that's because of the very minimalistic UI, there's still no reason for the absence of any charm or quality of life features Nintendo has been placing into their last couple of UIs. I highly doubt an additional animation or background noise would slow the UI to a noticeable degree that people will start getting up in arms about it. We and Nintendo have come a long way from the DS to be saying that adding the UI features present on the base 3DS would substantially slow the Switch down to the point that it disrupt the flow from boot to gameplay. Even if that was the case, why was there no option to have a fast boot or the typical Nintendo UI? When the Wii U first launched, it was met with a ton of criticism, one being the slow UI. So Nintendo, like any other good company, listened and improved the speed of the UI and added quality of life features like folders and the quick boot, which immediately after boot up let you pick a game or application directly launch right into, which I've yet to see any other console do. Yes, it wasn't as fast as lightning, but it was still a lot quicker than before and you got right into a game. No UI interactions if you didn't want to mess with it. So it is very baffling to me how Nintendo has essentially gone backwards and reverted to even less so with how things were with the original DS. At least there, it had a quick boot feature, which the Switch lacks. I mean, if the goal Nintendo was aiming for with the Switch's UI was to cut down time from turning on the system and playing by gutting any kind of charm and to be as minimalistic as possible, I don't understand the lack of a quick boot feature the DS and Wii U had. Seems like an oversight if this was the case. Ignoring the quick boot thing, it also doesn't make sense to omit the additions of folders that both 3DS and Wii U introduced, since in reality, it would do nothing but improve the UI, but again it has been lost in translation for whatever reason. Going back to the Nintendo charm, like I've said previously, a majority of Nintendo's consoles had their charm either oozing out or appropriately placed throughout the system, Just look at the Famicom Disk System startup. It shows Mario and Luigi messing around while the game loads. Or even when you flick fast through the DSi's menu, tiles will react accordingly. Just about every console greeted its user with a nice jingle or animation. The iconic Game Boy Sound, Game Boy Advance, DS, GameCube, and Wii jingles we associate with the consoles came from their startup animations. The Nintendo Switch does have this click sound, but it only plays when again you boot up the system for the first time, and that's it. Hell, even the PS4 and Xbox One still have startup jingles. Nintendo are the only ones to not have one anymore. Speaking of which, the initial boot up of the Switch actually has some of that Nintendo charm. With each time you advance through the next menu, an accompanying sound plays, but nothing of the sort ever happens again. I could go on about the UI, like how they deliberately hid the Mii creation behind a bunch of menus, as if they're ashamed of it, and how the lack of any kind of ambient music or noise really makes the system feel devoid and empty of life, especially during the Mii creation, or how there's only 2 color options, when it could be very easy to add different colors to the system. It'd have literally no impact on the console whatsoever, and so on and so forth. Also related to the UI is the Nintendo eShop. Every eShop, whether it be the Wii, DS Online stores, or the eShops for the 3DS and Wii U, each one had evolved from its previous iteration and felt more than just browsing a literal web page. They had their own unique themes, graphic, art that changed over the years, and even had special themes when it came to the holidays. Once again, Switch being the minimalistic it is, it's literally just a slow web page with nothing unique about it. Even the game store on Nintendo's official website has more effort put into it than Nintendo Switch's eShop, and that's just sad. No music, slow menu interactions, minimal user interface, just a stock look and go interface. Again, you can argue that it's to make the process easy and fast, but the thing is PlayStation does the same thing and is still at least able to theme the store better and give it some personality. This time I can't really defend the slowness that came from the previous eShops because both the Wii U and 3DS are kinda slow. But in my opinion it was worth it. If you really wanted a fast way to browse a console's e-store, you can always just use the official websites instead. Let's not lose focus though. Nintendo eShop is still pretty bad in its presentation. It's too simple and limiting that makes it very hard to navigate through the storefront. Basically, if the game you're looking for isn't on recent releases, bestsellers, or coming soon page, good luck finding it again if you didn't wishlist it before it disappears in the vast sea that is the Nintendo Switch eShop. It is crazy that just about nothing has been done to improve the eShop other than ironically adding animations for the wishlist and highlighted games. Again, it has been 4 years. If you thought this minimalistic approach only applied to the console itself, you'd be mistaken. Surprisingly, this has even bled into their games. The main examples being Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, ARMS, and Mario Tennis Aces. Just for comparison's sake, I'm going to show the startup of some of the previous games in their respective series to show what I mean.
Super Mario Odyssey!
It's like Nintendo really wanted to go for the minimalistic theme, but again, I don't think they can pull it off, nor is it in character. Granted, later Switch games have abandoned this format, so far, thankfully, but it goes to show how this minimalistic approach is pretty stock and soulless, and how this mindset has bled into other aspects of the Nintendo Switch. The minimalistic approach and the lack of trying to improve something that was already great is really my main issue. It's like Nintendo is hell-bent on rethinking how their console should be perceived, because this just screams of Nintendo trying to not look as child-friendly as possible and to be as neutral and stock as possible. It's to the point where the PlayStation 4 looks more fun than the Switch, a Nintendo console. I haven't really brought up Xbox, and that's because they've basically gone the same minimalistic route, and I don't like it there either, but Nintendo is doing it in such a way that it's detrimental to the system UI. Plus, I haven't really kept up on the Xbox UI, so I don't know much aside from little personal experience. It's not like people have been absolutely silent about this issue. They might have been when the console first came out, but now you'll see comments asking or wanting the bare minimum like folders or even more themes, and it's been asked for a couple of years now, and it's ridiculous that something Nintendo themselves introduced with the 3DS is something fans are begging Nintendo to add to their most powerful and successful console 3 years into its life. I can't wait for the next Nintendo console to come out and we don't have a UI with graphics anymore. It'll just be all text based and we'll all have to deal with it because it's
Nintendo!
And to even add even further, I haven't even brought up issues like the overpriced ports, the Joy-Con drift situation, the limited releases, their unfinished games and their finish it later approach to free updates, lack of transparency, all of Nintendo Switch Online, and among other issues that have seemingly started to grow and get worse. I mostly just want to focus on the UI and personality aspect, since I don't see it brought up when people talk about issues with the Nintendo Switch. It's also disheartening to see the console selling so well, only to offer their customers so little by putting as little effort into the Switch as possible, it seems. I know I'll sound nostalgia biased, but I don't think these issues would have existed during the GameCube or Wii U days at this high of a level as it is now. This is why I feel like the Nintendo Switch is the most anti-Nintendo console to date. Nothing about it represents the Nintendo charm or feeling you get with literally any other Nintendo console besides the Virtual Boy, NES, and Super Nintendo. It feels more like a generic Android tablet than a video game console, which it technically is, but even then, the Android tablet it's based off of has more personality than the Switch does. Surprisingly, while writing this, it hit me that this probably was entirely Nintendo's intention from the beginning. The whole lack of Nintendo charm and soul could be an attempt to appear more approachable and relatable, trying to emulate how, I guess, recent mobile devices appear and feel to not intimidate developers or users. This does sound kinda stupid, I know, but looking at what gets put on the eShop, just about anything, imagine browsing certain games while happy and vibrant music plays. The UI itself, I can't really defend other than not giving developers extra work like creating additional titles, headers, graphics, icons, models, or even unique loading screens, making it very simple to just copy work done from publishing titles from other platforms like the PlayStation 4. All this for the sake of making the porting process to Nintendo Switch as simple as possible and appeasing developers who complain about bringing their titles to the Nintendo platforms in the recent past. This is just my theory, as it seems like developers do like to have the option to create unique media like themes and avatars for consoles like the PlayStation 4, or unique art for achievements, cover art, or cards for platforms like Steam. However, Nintendo opted not to let there be any options for individual developers to decide whether or not they could or couldn't create such things like themes or any unique attribute you see on the 3DS or Wii U. So, in conclusion, the reason we have been snuffed out of the usual Nintendo charm we're used to seeing is due to them trying to ironically replicate the competition for the sake of appeasing third parties and indies and zipping any issues in the bud, even to the extent of it affecting Nintendo's own identity in the landscape, now looking more like another generic Android tablet manufacturer. But that's just my opinion. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more content in the future. I don't like doing that, but apparently that helps the video be seen or something. But yeah. Thanks for watching.